So how did you, if you want to just start, just tell me sort of like why you got sent to Bethel, how you got sent there.
So basically, it's 1997. I was a sophomore in high school. Just got my driver's license. I was actually going to a Christian high school. Come from a very strong religious background, family-wise. Was having problems in school. I transferred to the Christian school in eighth grade. I went to public school before that, and I really, it wasn't too much that I was doing that was like devastating, but for my family it was. I know there's kids I went to school with there that had been mixed into drugs and gangs and a lot of different things. But for me personally, it wasn't as severe. I was just having problems in school. I was borderline of getting expelled from the academy, the Christian academy, which was very expensive. I grew up in a single parent family home. So it was hard. There was a lot of people helping with my education costs and things like that. So my mom took it very personally that I was doing so poorly in school, acting out, lashing out, um, and things like that. So I was on the verge of being expelled, and then I started dating a girl who was not religious. She did not come from the church or anything or the school, and I was sneaking out at night, meeting up with this girl, and my mom, I guess, just had enough. And apparently, one of the kids that I had went to church with, there's a church and school all together, but one of the kids actually had gotten sent to Bethel before me. Um, his name was Zelensky, I believe. But and my mom had talked to their parents through the church and talked with the pastor of the church was also the principal of my school, and he was a very strict Southern Baptist kind of no funny business kind of guy. So when they heard about this Bethel Baptist Military Academy, it really rung a bell for them. And knowing people that had went there, they thought, oh, this would be a good option for Justin. So my mom talked to me one day and said, Justin, look, you're about to get kicked out of school. You're going to fall behind a grade. I know you don't want to do that. You're sneaking out at night. I was working 3 jobs at the time while going to school. I kind of being in a single parent family, I always had to kind of provide my own way. So I always bought my own clothes and stuff. But she's like, we can get you down there to this school. She started telling me about this military academy. And she kind of brought it off as like, this would be good for you, some discipline. They'll teach you some trades. They're going to help you through school so you don't fall behind. They have, like a physical activity that they have to do every day so you'll stay in shape. And she kind of threw out all these good things about the school and said, would you be interested in going, if it kept you from getting kicked out of school? Because once I got kicked out of school, you weren't allowed to ever come back. So the school had said, if I went to this military academy and I passed and I graduated, that they would allow me to come back and I wouldn't get expelled and I'd be accepted back to the school. I was not thrilled with the idea, especially being from Illinois, northern Illinois, and moving all the way down to Lucedale, Mississippi. I'd never moved away from home. I never worked away from home. I never went to school away from home. So it was scary for me in that aspect. And on top of that, it's a military school. I didn't know what to expect. I have a lot of family in the military, so I kind of knew a little background of possibly what could be involved. And then she just came out one day and said, you know what, we're taking a trip and we're going to go down and we're just going to visit the school and look at it. And you tell me what you think. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. And these things were kind of, I guess, told to her by Brother Fountain that these are things that you should expect Justin to respond with. And he gave her a list of things to kind of say, kind of some cues to stick by. And so basically just to make me feel comfortable bringing me to the school, because once I got there, I was not leaving. There was no option of going back home. So as soon as I got to the school, it was really late at night, and we walked into Brother Fountain's house, and I remember my first impression was I was sitting on his leather sofa there in the living room with my mom, and Brother Fountain had come in with drill instructor Knott. And he said, Miss Donnelly, it's nice to meet you," and shook her hand. And then he looked at me, he said, "This must be Justin." And I just kind of was like, "Yeah." And I was sitting on the couch, and he reached out to shake my hand, and I shook his hand. And as soon as he grabbed my hand, he just jerked me off the couch. And he's like, "Son, we live in the South here, and we show respect to people. You stand when you shake a man's hand." And right then and there, I kind of understood, I guess exactly what was going to happen from there. And I just looked at my mom like, "Well, okay, I don't like this place. Let's leave." and and she turned around, started crying. It was emotional for her. And then I think Brother Fountain's wife actually walked her into the kitchen. And at that point, Brother Fountain just looked at drill instructor Knott and said, "Mr. Knott, take him to the barracks." And I'm like, what is going on? What is going on? And he basically just dragged me out of the house and straight to the barracks. And from there, it was straight to the chair to get my head shaved, which was not a fun experience by itself. And, there was a lot of screaming and yelling and kind of getting you in line to kind of fall into order there. And that lasted about an hour, I want to say. And then my mom finally came down on her way out to say goodbye. And, I'm trying to plead with her, like, where are you going? You can't just leave me here. This isn't right. And that's when she just hugged me. She's crying. She told me she loved me, and then she just left. And that was kind of the beginning for me.
Yeah. So what happened after your mom left? Just sort of go over what happened just that first day or first week or whatever.
So that first night, as soon as because there was I can't remember, one of the senior cadets that was there was actually, I think there was two of them down there with me when my mom was saying goodbye. And as soon as she left, they kind of took me upstairs or pushed me, kind of forcefully. I had to go upstairs, and I get in there. And at this point, I'm kind of at my tipping point. Like, I'm over the being upset, sad, mom's leaving, to this guy's getting in my face and pushing me around. And I don't do well with that kind of attitude. And I'm kind of high tempered anyway. I always have been. So it escalated pretty quickly, and drill instructor Knott stepped in. I remember getting slapped around quite a bit, thrown to the ground, kicked, all those good things that happened on a regular basis. I remember having to lay, face down on the upstairs tile floor there, while they just all stood around me screaming and yelling and things. And eventually, I just thought, you know what, I just want to get through this night. Let's just see what tomorrow brings. And but I remember, I think it was probably about another 4 hours that night that there was another kid that had started, I don't know, I think just a day or two before me. So we were in what they called orientation. And you're basically in orientation for about a week or longer, depending. It just depends on how long it takes to break you mentally into being submissive and just listening and doing everything they say. And however long that takes is how long you're in orientation. And during that time, you're given a booklet of rules and things that you have to abide by and follow, and terminology and things you have to learn. You had to be able to pass a test at the end of that before you could graduate orientation. So I went through I guess they called it PT, physical training. But in this case, for being in orientation, they wear you out. They call it wearing you out. So they would, lay down on the tile floor, legs stretched out, arms stretched out, and just roll in a continuous circle up and down the squad bed, between the racks, between the bunk beds, and just over and over. And if you try to stop, they kind of kick you in the balls, or kick you in the stomach, or you'd vomit, and they'd keep kicking you, and you'd be rolling in your own vomit and blood. And this went on for about 4 hours of this. And duck walks, I think we did duck walks that night, where you just squat down, put your hands above your head, and you just walk like a duck all around wherever they tell you to go. So by the time I went to bed, I was physically exhausted. I was bloody. in tears. I was terrified. That night got over, and it resumed at I believe like 0500 in the morning with similar routine, and it just kind of continued throughout the week like that. And I guess it would be the second night after that. The drill instructor not always had boxing every night, and I think it was a way to kind of tailor people's anger toward each other. So if you had a problem with somebody, you could call them out, and no matter what, if that person wanted to or didn't want to fight, they had to fight. So if somebody called you out by name, you had to fight them. There was no question about that. So the second night, nobody called me out specifically, but drill instructor not did, and he picked the guy that I was in orientation with to box. I knew nothing about boxing, and it kind of turned into like just a bunch of guys standing in a circle screaming at us while we just pounded each other's face in until one of us gave up. And that was the second night. I think it was about the fourth day when I finally broke. I remember because we were doing 8-count bodybuilders in front of Brother Fountain's house. It's the middle of the summer out there. It's Bluesdale, Mississippi. It's 106 degrees out. It was really hot. We've been getting worn out all day. It was almost dinner time, and they weren't going to let us eat. They were letting everybody eat, and they were just holding that over our heads. Like, well, you're not going to eat until you show me that you can, do what we're asking. And that's when I just kind of lost it. I guess I was doing 8-count bodybuilders, and I just went at a pace that I didn't even like. It felt surreal. Like it was a mind out of body experience where I could kind of feel myself just looking at myself doing this exercise so fast that I felt like I was going to pass out, just screaming at the top of my lungs. And I remember that right after that happened, they stopped us. They knew that they had broken me at that point. And, then it was kind of laxed a little bit after that. So they let us eat. We kind of talked a little bit. The next day, it was a similar routine the next day where we got wore out all day. There's various exercises I could go into great detail about. Just for time wise, I won't. But by the end of the day, drill instructor Knott had called me to his desk. He had a desk right in the middle of the squad bed, right at the end of all the racks, right by his barracks. And he called me down there, and he whispered something. And I'm like, what was that? And he whispered it again. He said, get closer. And I kept leaning over until like my ear was like right at his mouth. And that's when he just like reached over like that and bit a hole through my earlobe with his teeth. And, it hurt really bad. And it like brought a tear to my eye. And then everybody in the barracks started clapping and cheering. I'm like, what just happened, And he's like, congratulations, you just passed orientation. So he went through the whole book, the orientation book, asked me a bunch of questions. I answered them. He said that I passed. Once I passed that portion of it, I was allowed to be with the I guess it was like the private first class group, which was upstairs. Things are very tight up there. So once I passed the book portion, the test portion, they had everybody stand in 2 lines up the squad bed. Everybody that was a private first class or above could stand in the line, and drill instructor Knott stood at the very end of the line, and you had to walk through with your hands like across your chest like this, and that's all you could do. You couldn't move your hands away from your chest. You just had to keep them there, and you had to walk directly down the middle of that line, and everybody got to take a swing, a punch or a kick at you anywhere they wanted. The face, the balls, the stomach, the chest, the back of the head, whatever. They got one hit. And as long as you made it through that entire line, you got down to the end. And I remember when I finally got down there, drill instructor Knott acted like he was going to punch me in the face really hard. And I kind of flinched back when he swung. And then he kneed me really hard with his knee right in the side of my thigh, and like gave me a Charlie horse, and I, dropped to the floor immediately. And then he picked me up, and everybody clapped, and he kind of put his arm around me, and then I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but he was talking to the group and saying something, and basically just saying, this guy just passed orientation. Congratulate him, take him in as part of the team. Um, at that point, I was so like incoherent. I don't really remember a whole lot of what was going on, but I do remember getting punched in the face quite a few times, getting kicked multiple times by multiple people, kneed, punched in the stomach, kicked in the groin. But that was all part of it. You fall down, you cough, you cry, you spit blood, whatever, you get back up and you keep going. And that was my first week at Bethel.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess you just want to go over now, just sort of like, I know you mentioned your mom, just sort of go over briefly, I guess, what the rest of your time at Bethel was like. Anything you want to share about that? Maybe tell the story of your mom and what you were telling me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So after my first week of orientation, things kind of went smooth sailing for a little while. We had PT, physical therapy, torture, in other words, every day at 5 a.m. So we'd get up at 5 a.m., we'd run down and run around an 8-mile trail that they had. And after the 8 miles was up, we did a bunch of like wind sprints and push-ups and sit-ups and different things. It took about 2 to 2.5 hours every day, every morning to do that. And after that was done, we kind of, got a bathroom break, a water break, and then it was straight downstairs to line up to get ready for work, and or school, depending if you had work or school. So during the summer we had work. That's when I started. They split you off into groups, whether it was cutting weeds with a sickle in the ditch, or digging trenches, or digging out tree stumps with shovels, just various jobs. But you do that all day till lunch. We'd have lunch, we'd break for lunch, you'd get 10 minutes for lunch. The entire group had to eat in 10 minutes and then out. And that's from the time the first guy starts to the last guy. And if you were at the end of the line, you probably weren't eating lunch. And if you did, it was very little, and you're trying to eat it while you're taking your plate up to the chow hall to get it turned in, to get it washed. And then after that, everybody gathered around. We all did the dishes together. We all cleaned everything, had to be spotless, and then we formation outside after lunch while the drill instructor did an inspection. If we didn't pass the inspection, then the whole group's getting wore out. And again, same scenario. You're doing all types of different kind of calisthenics, and the whole time the drill sergeants, or staff sergeants, excuse me, would be like there was 3 of them when I was there, and they were the guys that kind of been there the longest. They kind of earned the trust of the drill instructor. They're kind of like his right-hand man. They would keep everybody in line. They would participate in the beatings, and the motivation, I guess you could say. So after, if we passed and everything looked good, we just go back to work or go back to school. Similar routine for dinner, same thing. And then after dinner was go back to the barracks and boxing. And then after boxing, everybody got a 2-minute shower. And if you were in the shower longer than 2 minutes, then you were drug out by your hair or your arms or whatever they could grab, get a hold of. Obviously, it wasn't much hair, but they would just pull you out of there, and naked or not, didn't matter. But and that was kind of a typical day there at Bethel. Throughout my time there, I had seen multiple kids try to run away, and that was a very big no-no. You did not want to run away, or at least if you did, you didn't want to get caught, because drill instructor Knott had trained a pit bull that he had called Head. This dog, and apparently, drill instructor Knott was from Detroit, Michigan, and he had 13 brothers and sisters. what it sounded like. He grew up in the ghetto and then went straight to the Marine Corps. So this guy was a gangster for sure. I know the day he showed up, he was wearing gold chains and baggy clothes and kind of fit the gangbanger mentality kind of look. But he bragged about it a lot that he had fought dogs in Detroit for money with his gang members. And he did similar routine with this dog that he called Head. He fed it weight gainer and gunpowder. And this dog ended up being about a 90-pound pit bull, which is a very, very big pit bull. Most pit bulls are about 45 pounds. It was about twice the size of a regular pit bull. And then he tied a chain to its neck. And then in the middle of the chain, from a tree to his neck, in the middle of that was a cinder block. And he would have the staff sergeants, he'd have them hit the dog on the head with a broom handle and get him to lunge at him like this. And every time he'd lunge like that, that cinder block would like bounce like this. And it just built that dog's neck up. It was real muscular. It was big. And that's why he called him Head, because it just looked like a big head. But he made us go out in the yard from the barracks all the way to Brother Fountain's house. It was a big open like football field. And he would have two kids take off running, and he'd give them about a 30-yard lead, and then he'd let the dog go, and he'd go, "Sick him, Head." And that dog would sprint down and grab you by your belt and pull you to the ground, and then stand over top of you growling until he got there. So he did that to train these dogs. He had a few of them. This was the first one, but he did that to train them to catch kids that ran away. And he used them all the time for kids that ran away. And the dog would pinch, he'd bite holes in you and everything else. And you'd say something, but he'd just scream at you or smack you or something to get you to try to stop talking about it or complaining about it, I guess. But I seen quite a few kids run away. They were all caught except one, who was eventually caught after about 6 months, but that was the longest anybody had ever made it. And when they got back, they'd have a crew. They'd have the dogs, and they'd have the 3 staff sergeants go with in the back of Bubba's pickup truck or Brother Fountain's pickup truck, and they just drive around looking for you. Once they found you, it was over. Like, they just beat the ever living hell out of you. And they'd kick you down. They'd beat the snot out of you. They'd bring you back to the barracks. They'd beat you some more. I remember one of the first kids that I seen that ran away, drill instructor Knott had actually set this kid up for failure. He told the whole group, hey, this kid's new. He must have had a bad story of why he was there. It was never shared with us. But from the get-go, drill instructor Knott did not like this kid. And he told everybody that he was going to have one of the younger kids. I think it was Alan or somebody else. I can't remember for sure. Maybe it was Lucas Corbett. But he had one of them try to coax this kid into sneaking out and running away his first night in. Like, look, nobody's paying attention. He's standing out in the middle. But everybody else knew not to move because drill instructor Knott wanted this guy to try to run away. So eventually the guy got enough courage where he's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'll go with you. We'll run. And he gets out, and as soon as he hits the door, he goes outside, and drill instructor Knott was waiting outside with the other 3 guys already. And I just heard drill instructor Knott yell really loud, "Woo!" like that. And it took about 10 minutes after that, and they brought him upstairs. His eye was bleeding, his nose was bleeding, his mouth was bleeding. The guy was just shivering, like shaking hysterically. And they drug him upstairs and threw him on the tile floor face down. And I remember watching drill instructor Knott walk up his leg, like from his ankle. He walked all the way up his leg and up his back and kicked him in the back of the head like as hard as he could. The kid busted his face off the tile floor. And then drill instructor Knott walked around parading himself for a while, and then finally stood the kid up, and then kind of bragged on himself about how he made this kid shit his pants, like a complete, it wasn't diarrhea or anything like that. It was an actual shit. The kid shit his pants because he was so terrified. And then he made him do his calisthenics. He wore him out for the rest of the night with shit in his pants. He didn't even let him clean it off. And that was just one instance. But after that, they would put you in a red jumpsuit, sweatpants and sweatshirt. And if you ran away with somebody else, then the two of you had to go out and cut down a tree, and you cut about an 8-foot section out of probably like a 6-inch round tree. And they would have to carry that on their shoulders all week. Whatever they did, they had to have that log with them. And they would have them take that log up and over, up and over the beds, over the racks, like up and over, all the way over, around, just all day long, stuff like that. Sit-ups with it, push-ups with it. He'd put it on their backs, and then he'd sit on the middle of the log while they're doing push-ups. And the consequences if you don't follow through with the exercises. So that was another instance where somebody had ran away. There was Cadet Paulillo a week before I'd gotten there. They had rolled him, like I said, with your arms above your head and your legs stretched out. They rolled him for like, I guess like a day and a half in the barracks. That's all they did all day long. And he eventually kind of lost his mind, and he ran and jumped. He threw open the upstairs hatch and jumped off the second balcony and dove headfirst into the concrete and broke his arm. They screamed and yelled at him, called him an idiot and everything else. They beat him a little bit, and then they kept wearing him out with a broken arm. They didn't believe that his arm was broken. And it was like 3 days later, they finally had to take him to the emergency room because his arm started turning green and he was getting gangrene in his arm. And one other kid that had ran away, Cadet Sill, he was one of the guys that just got singled out really bad. I think he was from California, but he was getting beat severely on a regular basis, and he ran away multiple times. And finally, the last time, his family came down and tried to find him. They didn't know where he was. They actually found him in the middle of a 4-lane highway in Mobile, Alabama. With he was sitting Indian style in the middle of the median with a styrofoam cup with grass in it and a grasshopper, and like he was like petting it and talking to it. He had totally lost his mind, and his parents actually took him to the hospital, and he had 3 broken ribs and multiple contusions on the back of his head from getting beat so severely. Those things kind of resonated really hard with me. So coming from my background, I knew just do what they say or you're gonna get beat. So those events went on for about 6 months. I'd say 6.5 months, and then as the little bit that we did get to correspond with our parents, everything was monitored. Phone calls were monitored. Letters were written before they were sent out. Things were omitted. If you wrote something in there that they didn't like, they just take a black permanent marker and scratch it all out so that it couldn't be read. But the little bit that I did get to talk to my mom, she knew very little about what was going on because, they're listening, they're watching, they know everything you're doing. And you know what happens when you do something minor, so you're not going to do something that severe. And he always said that they're not going to believe you anyway. It was always kind of preached that, you can tell your parents this is going on or that's going on, but they're never going to believe you. But she told me that I'd be getting to see a lot of her because she was moving to Lucedale, Mississippi, to work for Brother Fountain. And I'm thinking, oh, good Lord, she has no idea. And I know my mom, she wouldn't stand for anything like that. So she moved down there. Actually, it was the middle of a hurricane. My cousin helped her move down there. 2 of my cousins did. They both had an eerie feeling when they got there. They kind of knew something was wrong. They had told me that while they were there, but there was very limited time that we actually got to talk without somebody being there watching everything I was saying. But they did tell me, to just stay focused, that they were there for me, and that when this was all over, they were going to help me out. But my mom moved in. They had a trailer there on campus that she had moved into with my cousin Missy. They had both started working there, and from their perspective, they never got to see anything. The only things that they would see is us running, past the trailer in the morning as we're going for our run or as we're coming back. Every once in a while, she'd see kids get screamed at, and eventually she started seeing kids getting smacked and things like that. So she knew, like, hey, okay, this isn't right. But majority of it would happen in the barracks at night when nobody could see or nobody knew, or we're way out deep on our trail in the middle of the run, or something of that nature. So she didn't get to see a whole lot of it. But after she had been there about a month and a half, she didn't tell me this till way after the fact, but she said that Brother Fountain had actually approached her, and they wanted to they tried to make her be the school nurse. And my mom's like, I'm not a nurse. I'm not qualified to be a nurse. I'm not going to be a nurse. And they were basically telling her, you're going to be the nurse. So what they were doing is all these kids that were getting injured, they wanted to send to her so that she could write off and say, oh, this happened because he fell during this exercise, or this, injury is not as severe, just so that, like, a medical standpoint, it would be okay what was going on, so that there wouldn't be any liability. And my mom knew that, and she disagreed with it and would not do it. And they had hounded her about it for about a month, and like I said, that's about that time is when Mrs. Fountain came in the middle of the night to my mom's trailer and woke her up and told her, grab your son and get out of here, because kids are getting beat, social workers are coming, I don't want you getting involved in any of this, I don't want your son getting involved. My mom still to this day says, she just goes, I don't know if she did that for us or if she did that for them, and who knows. I would like to think she did it for us, because Mrs. Fountain was a sweet woman, very caring, and I think she turned a blind eye to a lot of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's just some of the stories that I have, some of the things that have happened. There's, countless more, but just some of the things that I've shared through the years. And like you said, at first I would tell people all these things, and eventually it got to the point where I'm just talking and everybody's just looking at me, and you can just tell by the look in their eyes, they're like, they don't believe a word I'm saying. There's no way. So I just quit talking about it for a long time, and eventually it just kind of got stuffed way back in there where that stuff didn't happen, or I just forgot about it, or I didn't want to think about it. So, but that was my time at Bethel. I was there about 8 to 9 months before we had gotten sent home.